Okay, so everyone, again, apologies for that, but you guys did awesome, so I'm very proud of you. So very briefly, let me introduce myself. I'm Frank O'Sullivan. I'm Director of Research here for MIT's Energy Initiative, and I'm also the lead instructor for MIT's Energy Ventures class here at Sloan. And it's really a great pleasure for me to have been asked to come and moderate this session for the Localized Energy panel. It's a really, it's an issue that's very close to my heart, and I think the three winners that we have here today bring three very, very interesting dimensions to this space. I think everybody here is going to find it fascinating. It's going to be a very interesting discussion for me, and I think in the breakout sessions, hopefully, they'll be very productive for both you and for the winners. So with that, I think what we're going to do is I'm just going to ask each of our three winners to briefly stand up, introduce themselves. We'll do that together, and then we'll step through their videos, and then following that, we'll have some initial moderated discussion. Okay. So to begin, from Smart Cities, I guess, Elizabeth, please come join and introduce yourself. I guess you have to sit down, I think, for a microphone potentially.
Thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here. And Climate Smart is a social enterprise out of Vancouver, British Columbia. And we've been working passionately, I would say, over the greater... Thank you. How's that? Perfect. For the greater part of 10 years, been very passionate about working with small and medium-sized businesses as key partners in a community for making that transition to a low-carbon economy, helping them measure and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And more recently, we've asked, how can we use this building data set to help accelerate insight for other cities and communities? And this was the idea of creating our BEEP, our Business Energy Emission Profile, which we produced for 8 communities, Canadian cities, and then convened everybody and asked how we could make it better. And what we're presenting today is the better, spatial, interactive, public-facing data that a community and the private sector can look at to see how best to engage businesses.
Super. Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes. We look forward to it.
Great.
So our next winner from Franchise Microgrids is James. James. Hi, James. Come on over.
Hi, I'm Jim Gula, retired computer engineer. I got involved in this, been heavily involved in an emergency preparedness program in Southern California called CERT. And I have my own grid system at home and was frustrated that it was very expensive to convert it to an off-grid system. I have just a grid tie system. And I started looking, why can't we use the economies of scale of the computer industry to reduce some of these key components? And then I also got sort of inspired. You see all these videos of poor people all over the world. Wherever you go, there are entrepreneurs, even in the poorest communities. Why couldn't we harness that spirit, entrepreneurial spirit, to let them sort of solve their own problems? And that was the idea of, the franchise model, where you sort of give them the technology and the tools they need, and then let them run their own business, maintain it, collect the money. It has to be a business. If you give things away, it always seems to fall apart. But if you get people incentive to make money, that's the deal. So anyway, that's my idea.
Fascinating. Looking forward to it, Jim. Thank you. And finally, but certainly not least, from the Collective Power Platform, Michelle, please come join us. Thanks.
We can slide over.
Yeah.
So my name is Michael Roelos. I'm from the Netherlands, and together with Nicodem, we created basically a new way for energy markets. We worked as a consultant for a Spanish energy supplier in the Pyrenees. And basically what we saw there was sort of the future of the electricity system, where instead of having a couple of centralized big players sort of making sure that we have a secure supply of energy, we're going towards a future where people will be producing and consuming their own energy. And that also means that we're kind of creating sort of collective markets. And instead of just talking about smart grids, we think that we also should be talking about smart markets. And that's why we proposed the Collective Power Platform, which is basically people within one city who together as a collective create some sort of auction market a virtual utility, you could say. And for example, could be Boston Energy or Eindhoven Energy, where I'm from. Because we believe that in the end of the day that renewable energy is not only the way to go, it's also an opportunity for people to really become engaged within their energy system. So we believe that energy is something that should be done by the collective. And we believe that energy in the end of the day should be ours. It's a nice way of saying it.
I think, yeah. For me personally, I love it because I work a lot in that space, and I think it's just superb. So, so everyone, these are our 3 winners. Right now, first, I think we should give them a big round of applause. All right? Congratulations. So we've got 3 videos, and I think I'll ask the guys at the back. Fingers crossed. Let's play the videos, and from there we'll follow on with the discussion.
Stand by 1 moment.
Dead air. This is never fun for the moderator. Okay. Well, just a quick question to all 3. Are we good? All right. Let's try it. Yeah. Super.
It connects us, inspires us. It makes the impossible possible. We partner to right wrongs, and we partner so all people can experience the freedom of it. It calls upon our patience when faced with small challenges, and our greatest determination when confronted with big ones. Climate change is one of the most significant crises facing humankind. It will take all of us working together to overcome the odds. That's why we created a tool to make it easier for cities and businesses to partner more effectively together. It's called BEAM, Business, Energy, and Emissions Profile. It's a carbon mapping tool. It helps local governments effectively collaborate with the leaders of small and medium-sized businesses. At its heart is an interactive map that graphically plots greenhouse gas emissions by industry, activity, business size, and impact. With this detailed information at hand, municipal staff can strategically partner with the businesses and sectors that have the biggest opportunities to cut carbon. Together, cities and businesses can partner to reduce emissions, strengthen communities, and create opportunity for shared success.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sheehan, CEO of Climate Smart. After nearly a decade operating Climate Smart's business program, we have gathered an extensive data set on energy, fuel, and waste in the private sector. Our research shows that while many cities have a handle on their own greenhouse gas emissions, what they don't understand is that 30% of their emissions come from small and mid-sized businesses. This crucial insight led to the development of the BEAM. And with the input of 8 Canadian cities, we're now ready to roll this out across North America. BEAM is a powerful tool, and with your help, we can make it even better. We want to give decision makers the ability to track emissions and track progress over time. To that end, we're seeking technical support to help us develop a robust methodology. Second, we're seeking funding, match funding partners from the government, philanthropic sectors to help us bring BEAMs to 100 North American cities over the next 2 years. At Climate Smart, we are committed to strong partnerships between cities and the businesses that call them home. Thank you for your interest and support.
All right.
17% of the world's population doesn't have access to electricity, yet much of the world's population growth is projected to occur in the same areas, which share a confluence of poverty, lack of education, and population growth. Providing access to electricity would begin to address these problems, and the best way to provide renewable sources close to where it's at. I'm Jim Gula, I'm a computer engineer by training. Graduated from MIT many years ago, worked in the computer industry, and took an early retirement from Intel a few years ago. Since then, I dabble in software and have worked with a volunteer group called CERT to prepare California for the next big earthquake. The proposal is to franchise microgrids that allow a renewable power source to be shared in a neighborhood or village. Franchisor provides technology, training, and seed capital to a local entrepreneur. Franchisee. Compared to extending a nation-centric, this approach keeps most of the revenue local. Compared to gifting such a system, it ensures that there is someone local motivated to maintain it, collect payments, and manage it. The role of the local entrepreneur is key, as he or she understands the village's needs and needs. This approach scales well from a minimal system, close lighting, and large enough to support power-intensive applications like cooking and local. Once installed, open source movement has changed the cost factor of software and has recently extended into solar panels and already on the steep distribution. Horsepower designs with driven standard same distribution. Franchises business, and so it means basic billing and software. Real-time load software management circuit minimize the franchise's value and help to explain with this project rollout. We need open source hardware and software designs adapted to the franchise business model, along with appropriate training maturity, so that someone without an engineering system. We also need seed capital to start. We can begin to deploy rapidly in 1 to 2 years, possibly partnership to build it on the experience of smart home, which has deployed their Sunblazer systems using similar business models, 80 Africa and other places.
Instead of a centralized system, real-time interaction, a huge number, decentralized, diverse set of people and technologies. A system where consumers as a collective provide the flexibility needed for secure supply of energy. Now, this also means that as the number of these consumers grows, an increasing share of the energy is being produced and consumed in the same distribution grid. Therefore, the price of energy will also reflect the local balance between supply and demand. This creates the need for a democratic, cost-effective market where consumers can directly exchange and evaluate these local flows of energy. Hi, I am Gula. We propose the local local utility created by direct interaction between collective consumers and collective power will empower people to make a personal choice about what they want to do, or even directly involve. Transparent price information allows people to make cost CO2 reflections, either buying energy from conventional sources or renewable collective power from their local peers. The platform also informs participants which energy technologies have highest predicted value within their respective local markets. This will not only create a huge new market for complementary services, but will also be the driving force in creating collective power capacity. Collective power is technology agnostic, open for all kinds of actors, ideas, innovative business. Collective power is better. At the same time, so the remaining demand, which is not covered by the supply of collective power, is bought on wholesale markets or from power collectors in different cities. This will make the platform a lot more reliable. And as each market will have unique cost characteristics, the platform can create cost synergies between different markets. Our ambition is to make collective power started by the market, big impact. Realize that our companies need to operate diverse solutions. For example, big operators and technology. We would like to thank our partners, European industry, in order to take the next step. We're exploring partners. Therefore, also our concepts are and all around the world, collaborate on creating truly smart very much. It connects us.
I've got to congratulate all of you for your on-camera presence. You did it really. Whenever I'm on camera, it seems so weird. So fortunately, it's my prerogative to ask a few questions before we open it up to the larger group. So I'll start with you, Elizabeth. So as I mentioned to you before we kicked off, I've been involved here in Cambridge with our efforts to develop a local GHG inventory within the city and within the university here at MIT. And it's been a fascinating process. I mean, a very complex process. What I've noticed is that cities, there's clearly an appetite for this kind of information, but it often seems slightly opaque as to how they take that notional kind of we want to do something and then actually make change with it. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, in your experience, what have you seen? You know, cities have learned about what's going on within their business communities. How have they then acted on that? What kind of impact have they been able to deliver?
Right. So our work specifically with businesses, we are tracking about an 11% on average reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, which is fantastic when we think about the businesses are growing. Jobs, I think we're tracking about 2.7% at the same time. So decoupling economic growth from emission reduction. Right. So those are great stories that obviously inspire the cities. So the way that we traditionally work is we wholesale deliver that program to a city and then we report back. Right. So the city of Vancouver gets to hear, across my 250 businesses, this is what's happening. And here are some of the investments that they're making. They're investing in, electric fleets, or they're reducing their waste, or they're rethinking about they're localizing their supply chain. So the businesses, in a way, help us tell the story of why it's important to get the cities, the partnership between cities and businesses.
So very interestingly, so you said they're localizing their supply chain. So, can you see is there either a potential or a real demonstrated additional boost from having this information, economic boost from having this information within the city, and kind of then players, community, businesses acting to try and reduce their footprint?
Definitely. I mean, we basically report out on cost savings, but there's also new investment dollars. So 1 out of 4 are investing in new heating and cooling investments, 1 out of 3 in new fleets. So we definitely are kind of tying it. One of the things that the BEEP does is that, let's say a food manufacturer has limited investments, but the city can decide to look across a neighborhood and put in infrastructure. Right. And this is why we have the data now spatially, so that they can sort where are the best or the bigger fleets, where might there be investment in organic waste recycling. So we're providing them with a little bit more.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So Jim, turning to you, so franchise microgrids, I mean, clearly, one of the world's great challenges in supplying energy services to the billion or more people that have no energy services at all today, and I think this really resonates with many people. I guess my first question is, how much power do you think really will make a difference initially? So to what extent do you need to electrify a village to really have impact? And then a second kind of related question, you mentioned, you'll find entrepreneurs everywhere, and I completely can, agree with that point, obviously. Have you had a chance to kind of bring this idea to some entrepreneurs in these rural villages to see how they're reacting to it, what the enthusiasm is there?
So first question is sort of how much power do you really need? And it's clear that there is a huge demand for power, even in these small villages. People really like the idea of being able to see at night, to do work at night. People like to be able to charge their mobile phones. Yeah. And what's happening in a lot of parts of the world, entrepreneurs are moving into that space. but they're moving in aggressively as a big business, and they're forcing people to make big money commitments that they can't afford.
Right.
And that's why I think it's really important to have people locally who understand the stuff and can control the cost and who gets, who can pay and who can't. So I think that, the lighting like the IEEE is doing is a great first step, but, so many parts of the world still use traditional cooking methods, and, women have to go out and collect firewood. It's a very dangerous situation in a lot of places. I think the ability to cook a meal in a home is a key thing, and that's not a huge amount of power. I think that's on the order of sort of a kilowatt hour to cook, a family of 4. I did some research on that, and that's an interesting question of how much energy does it take to cook a meal, basically. And then another key question is, suppose you want to start a business, or you need irrigation pumps or those kinds of things. How much power does that need? And that obviously varies enormously, but again, a couple of kilowatt hours a day can get you going with a threshing machine or get a pump going. And so I don't think it's really all that huge.
The other issue in our group, we look at India quite a lot, actually, around many of these dimensions. And one thing that we found frustrating in the Indian context, at least, is there's quite a lot of bureaucracy, even within this, even within regions where there's no energy, there's a lot of energy bureaucracy. Are there barriers that you see right now that are going to be important to overcome, or that look likely to be challenges or not?
Well, I mean, clearly there is. I mean, even in the United States, there are barriers to deploying, renewable energy sources, because there's this huge infrastructure of the central grid. They've got lots of money and power sort of tied up there. I mean, I think one of the things that's fascinating to me is this idea of distributing not just electrical power, but it's also like political power. I mean, there are places in the world where the central grid gets to control people's lives. If you turn off electricity, it has a huge impact on their lives. And if people can, take that initiative in their own hands and choose when they have power and when they don't, I think that's a great enhancement for freedom, and encourages people to, create a level of independence that they can't get in these huge monopolies.
Well, I think personally, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful concept. So really looking forward to it moving ahead. It's also a very nice bridge to Mikhail. As you said, I think people are increasingly looking to have control or engagement around their own energy choices. We see that here in the States. I mean, community solar and how it's growing. And I think the collective power platform is a really interesting extension of that, obviously. One question, though, that does come up is really how, people want a clean energy service and so on, but how interactive are they willing to be, or how interactive can they be? And I'm just curious, within your within your effort, within the collective power platform, what extent are people engaged? Is it a very dynamic? Is it automated? How's the user interface going to play out?
I think for starters, I think one of the key points of the collective power platform is that it's really democratic. So what we want to do is really create a sort of auction market within the distribution grid. But nobody's willing to trade energy all day. So I don't believe that's going to happen. But what we think is that with relatively simple user agents in a smart meter, we think that you only have to make a couple of decisions, maybe once a month, maybe once a year. Basically, cost reflective or value reflective decisions. So do you want to invest more in local power? It might be a little bit, 20% is probably more cheap, but then, 80%, you need some extra batteries, so that will be cost more, but less CO2. So I think on the basis of it, it's relatively easy. You don't even have to have a solar panel. You can just participate, choose what kind of energy mix you want, and then you're done. Then the second point is when you start to invest yourself. I think that will be the first step, because you will earn money on it. My father, he bought solar panels at a certain point, and then he started running inside every summer, and then he was looking at our usage. And then my mom was boiling some water in an electric kettle, and he went, what the hell is happening? And you really come engaged within demand. So for me, it's fine. I don't care how engaged you will be. That's your own choice. But I do personally believe that once you really get engaged and you really see that you're becoming part of a community, that there's a lot of different steps you can take. Also, I think one of the important things is that having a collective on a community level also opens up a lot of like new business models. So I mean, crowdfunding a solar panel, a wind turbine with the community,
Right.
is something which you can only do on a local scale. So I think it doesn't have to be that way, but I think over the time people will get more engaged.
Well, something that really resonates with the concept for me is, of course, the fact that it's kind of agnostic, right? So you can choose to purchase from the wholesale market if that's, there's a balance. And of course, that balance will shift as technology costs change over time and so on. And that really kind of, has a potential ubiquity that really, I think, is important. And because of that, I'm curious as to, you mentioned the need for partnership, right?
Yeah,
because it's a very complex regulatory and commercial landscape. How are utilities reacting, delivery utilities and so on? How are they reacting to this concept? I mean, how do you really bring them into the fold and make them see that this is something that's important to do?
Well, the funny thing is when you talk about peer-to-peer platforms and prosumers kind of platforms, that in its sense doesn't really mean anything. So you get a lot of utilities in Europe who come with a sort of peer-to-peer business model. But at the end of the day, it's basically focused on how are we going to translate this very complicated prosumer thing into national markets.
Right.
And we do it the other way around. We feel that we're going to translate this complex energy market to an individual prosumer. So what we see is that the traditional utilities, they want to cooperate, but it's always focused on national markets.
Right.
But what we do see as very viable partners are technology providers, because Tesla knows that we have to work together with an individual prosumer. And the second, I think, partners is especially the grid operators, because they know in Europe they are sort of controlled, regulated monopolies.
Yes.
And they really want to interact with the prosumer, but they're not allowed to. So I think that is sort of the playing field. So there is a lot of opportunity for third parties, and there's a lot of people, I would say, what we call them DSOs, but grid operators who are wanting to. But in the end of the day, it's really difficult to get them all in this new sort of competence, in this new reality. So I think that's a big challenge, but I see there's enough opportunity for people to move along.
No, it's the cutting edge. So it's lots of uncertainty, lots of opportunities.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's great. So let me open it up to the audience. So some questions, please. No questions? Come on. Yes, please.
Jim, I'm really interested in the franchised microgrid concept. And it seems like you perhaps approached that originally from a more urban setting, your emergency management background. That's something we've been exploring as a city, where I'm from, city of Indiana. But the local expertise on microgrids is lacking. It's a real challenge, and so the franchisable model makes a lot of sense to me. Do you see it having a role in a more urban setting?
Absolutely. I mean, particularly take a more extreme example, say Gaza, for example, where, power is intermittent. Many parts of India, the Middle East, in an urban setting, they have, electricity a few hours a day. How do you run a business when, you can't know when your electricity is coming? So I foresee this sort of franchise model applying within urban areas where, just was said, you get a collective of people that need, a reliable power source, starting small, but then connecting as they can interconnect with people in the same way.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about micro. I'm a little confused about this issue. So typically in America, when we have solar panels on our roof, we are allowed to give it back to the utility rather than tying it with the fixtures, right?
Yeah.
But the utilities charge us 3 times for every kilowatt hour we get. Right?
Yeah.
So you're actually supporting their business model and their pricing, because you could take the same kilowatt hours and use it directly without having to pay for transportation and the other overheads.
I agree. The difference is in what we have in Europe for a couple of places. You also have retail liberalization. So you can actually choose from different retailers. And what you see is that the distribution charges are always the same. What we see is that you can do it behind the meter. And that's going to happen. I mean, you get this manufacturer economics for both solar panels as well as batteries. However, to go from 100% individual user, we believe that there will be I think that you can have a sort of viable virtual utility more on a local scale. So you will need to have this kind of diversity. You need to also have maybe somebody in your streets has a wind turbine, somebody else has an electric car. So we believe that by having a sort of local virtual utility, you can actually become cheaper than the integrated utility. So I agree that it's a lot cheaper to do it behind the meter. But there's so many cost characteristics which are unique. There's so much synergy in working together on a local scale that I think in the end of the day, that will be a cheaper solution than doing it yourself, basically.
Can I have a follow-up question? So are the utilities actually preventing the introduction of technologies that would allow us to directly use these solar panels?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the end of the day, well, you can use it behind the meter, that it's allowed. But for example, the whole thing, what is really now changing the industry is batteries, because solar panels, it's a relatively simply technology. You just plug it in and it's done. There's nothing to control. With batteries, it's a completely different situation. Somebody needs to turn it on, charge and discharge technology. And this is where I think utilities starting to see, okay, if people are going to do that themselves, it's going to be a difficult situation. So what you see is right now, there's a lot of business model where the utility comes into your home and says, okay, I'm going to buy a battery for you and I'm going to control it and never mind. And we believe that what we see on the local level is that there's so many opportunities. For example, if you combine it with local businesses who have a production process which isn't 24/7, to just shift that production process to the night, then that is already can also have a huge benefit for the whole local community. So that's why we believe that by putting it open, making it transparent, there are so many opportunities that will arise from that situation.
Yeah, this gentleman, then I'll come to you.
Yes. Which are your next steps? What you're going to do next month, the next 6 months, 1 year?
Okay, so personally, we will be graduating on this subject. I'll be working on big data. I have a very nice data set, very unique in the world, about 5 major Swedish cities, to really look what is the appropriate level where energy is produced and consumed. So I'm one of the first in the world, to really see what is the relevant I would say, level. To be more precise about this, we want to bring this into reality, because we believe, especially with the innovations in battery and storage management, that this will be viable very, very soon. So as we speak right now, we're working on either creating a startup that will be in half a year or a year, or working together with the European initiative Kicking on Energy to create a pilot program. And this is something where we go outside regulations and we go either, I think we're talking about Norway. Well, there's yeah, so there would be 3 different, but I got a call from my university campus yesterday if they want to talk about creating on the campus. So there's a lot of people, local communities who want to try this. So I think we hope to start working on some sort of pilot within a year, but nothing is set yet.
How much money?
Sorry, I'm just going to have to bring, because there's several other questions. So we can discuss this in the breakouts. Yes, sir.
So in the micro, replacing cooking firewood. So what electric stove are you advocating, and is that part of the program? How do they get the money for that?
It's an interesting question. There's an interesting paper done by somebody, I think it's from a university in Denmark, that measured exactly how much electricity. He was basically trying to produce what he called the Effie cooker, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a very efficient cooking system. It's basically sort of like a rice cooker, but with more insulation and with sort of smarts to know when you get it and when you can't. Okay, so the trick is how do we mass market something like that? And my feeling is that sort of the same infrastructure that can do the franchise grid can expand to include, various bits and pieces you need to actually run electricity in your home. The cookers, the electrical panel, the wiring, switches and lights, all those have to be part of, the franchise. And again, we can sort of, if we can package this up, keep it simple, we can deploy it fairly quickly.
Who's your question for? For Elizabeth?
Yeah,
great.
On your dashboard.
Yes, good.
So we're part of an effort in Asheville and to eliminate a peaking plant. And I feel like we're part of a countywide group working on this actively with Duke of all companies. We have their ear. And I'd like to present about this back in Asheville. So I'd like to, do you have any kind of packets or presentation materials that we could go back and
Yes, absolutely.
communicate this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, maybe you guys can chat about that actually in the breakout right now. I have one final question, and then we'll break out for you actually, Elizabeth. So what was the most unexpected result from the deployment of the tool in the cities in Canada that you've seen? Did cities kind of walk away and say, that's very unexpected?
When we convened the 8 cities that did our first we did it in a report, you know, a sort of undynamic, and I was intrigued and surprised that they wanted it to be public facing.
Right.
That the 3 things they wanted was spatially, interactive, and public facing, and that's to help them in sitting in the city trying to get all this stuff to happen, to galvanize and get insight and get that data out so lots of things can happen as a result. So that was a neat surprise.
So I was building the consensus, building the motivation or the momentum behind the effort.
Yeah, so they can put better policies.
Yeah,
yes, exactly. The political constituents.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, look, guys. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break out for about 20 minutes. Each of the winners will go. I think there are three zones where they'll set. So please go. Discuss more, chat more feedback, more discussion, and then we'll wrap up in, as I said, in about 20 minutes time. Thank you. I think there's a sign for each one.
Okay, perfect.
So, sorry, Frank here again. So, collective power, the power platform is going to be right over here to my right, if that's helpful. Probably not. Microgrid's here in the center, and Beep is going to be over on that far wall. So, thank you guys.